us this week for our Week 3 Sunday Night Football. We have the San Francisco 49ers are playing against the Denver Broncos. For San Francisco, I'm going to do a tri-tip. That's a big part of California-style barbecue. Really excited for that. For Denver, we're going to do some Bison burgers. I wanted something a little bit gamey for up in the mountains. Additionally, the tri-tip that we're doing is going to be a Wagyu tri-tip, gold rated by Booth Creek Wagyu beef. It is a really beautiful cut of meat. It's got a lot of marbling. It's a way higher intermuscular fat than what you can get from pretty much anything else here in the United States. By our USDA grades, prime, which is like the highest you can get, rates out at about 10% intermuscular fat. This one was at 22 or 23%, so it's literally off the charts compared to that. It's going to be an incredibly juicy, incredibly tender cut of meat, and I'm very excited for that. First thing we got for tonight is a tri-tip for San Francisco. We've got a Wagyu tri-tip here. It's going to be really nice. See all that marbling in there? As that cooks, this is just going to melt into the meat, make it really juicy, really tender. So I'm really looking forward to this. For a nice piece of meat like this, you don't want to over-season it. So I'm keeping things simple. I've just got salt, pepper, garlic, and paprika. Just going to sprinkle some of that on all sides and then get that onto the grill. I'm going to be doing this on a reverse sear method, so I'm going to start with it on indirect heat and then let it get up pretty close to where I want the final temperature to be. And then once it's completely done, or almost completely done, then I'll switch it over onto direct heat to get a good sear. And that'll bring it up to hopefully right around medium or rare. So just getting a little bit on that surface. Flip it over and do the same to the back side. Touch up here along the sides a little bit too, not trying to get too much on here, but just want to get all those surfaces coated so that the flavor is consistent throughout. You can see the marbling here on the side. This is a nice piece of meat. So I'm gonna let those seasonings settle in there while the fire's getting ready. As soon as fire's up to temperature, then I'll get this thrown on there, and like I said, throw it on indirect heat to start with until it gets up to a nice rare temperature all the way through. Alright, so I got all my charcoal stacked up on one side here. That's going to allow me to have the tri-tip on the other side running on indirect heat. So I'll have the vents, when I get the lid on, I'll have the vents over here pulling the air through. I'll throw on some hickory chips so it gets some smoky flavor as it cooks. I'm going to keep it like that until it comes up to a temperature of about 120 inside. That'd be a very rare temperature right there. And then once it does that, the tri-tip will move over on top of the charcoals to get that sear. So I'll finish it on both sides right above the charcoals. But for now it's going to be running a little bit cooler, come up slowly for a more even cook, and it'll get nice pinkish red all the way through instead of that gray, then pink, then red that you get if you just throw something over direct heat. So for Denver, I wanted something a little gamey, wanted elk, bison, something like that. What I was able to find was some ground bison. So I've got 3 pounds of ground bison here. If you've ever eaten bison before, you know it's a very lean meat. Bison steaks are kind of dry. They get a lot of flavor, but they're kind of dry. The ground looked pretty similar. Looked like it's going to be really flavorful, maybe a little gamey flavored even, but probably very dry. So what I did to accommodate that is I chopped up just a couple of slices of bacon and mixed that in so it'd have a little bit of fat there. You can see the flecks, a little bit of bacon cut out throughout all of these burgers. That's going to give it just a little bit more juiciness, keep it a little richer flavor, kind of cut into that very lean bison-y flavor. So it's going to give it a little bit more balance. Alright, so the tri-tip is done. Ran it on indirect heat until it got up to about 110, 120 degrees internal depending on the spot. And then threw it under direct heat to finish off. See, it's got a nice bark all the way through. Should be right in the medium rare range once I open it up. When you're cutting a tri-tip, you do want to be careful. It's got a very strong grain. You can see all the lines running this way. When you slice it, you always want to slice against the grain so that you're chewing nice and tender bites of meat. So I'm going to turn it like this, and then just slice off little pieces here. Going pretty much right against the grain. So you can see it's got pretty consistent coloration throughout. It's not super gray around the outside and then super bloody red on the inside. If you do that reverse sear method, you should end up with a pretty consistent cook. And I'm not getting too much of the juice running onto the plate, so I let it rest after I took it off for about 10-15 minutes. That way the juices had a chance to kind of settle. And look at that. Right out of the middle there, that is a nice looking slice of meat. It's got right in that range between red and pink all the way through. You can see a little bit around the outside from where we got the sear, got kind of the reverse smoke ring going on. That is going to be a nice, tasty meal we got coming up here. To go with the tri-tip, did a little small batch of homemade chimichurri. So that's some parsley, thyme, and rosemary fresh from our garden. I chopped up mostly parsley out of those three, and then some chopped up garlic and onion to go with it too, and a little olive oil and red wine vinegar. You can add cilantro to that, you can add anchovies, that's a popular one for the more traditional style. The rosemary and thyme were not necessary at all, but we had fresh rosemary and the thyme in the garden, and that's always good on beef. You can kind of go your own way with this. Sometimes you'll see it as more of a paste where everything's blended together. Sometimes you'll see it more like this where it's in little chunks. It's kind of just up to the person making it as to how they like to do it. But that's going to go great with this tri-tip. It's going to give it a little bit of bite. I'm really looking forward to digging into this. As I'm slicing this, you'll notice right along the edge here the grain starts to curve. That's usually more pronounced with the tri-tip than it is here. But as you're getting toward the end, you want to kind of start angling your cuts. Or if it's a really pronounced turn, you might just slice it off in between and cut separately in those two separate directions. Kind of like a brisket where you've got the flat and the point with different grains. You want to pay attention to that as you're slicing. So I'm going to start kind of angling mine off a little bit here so that I keep all of those bites nice and tender. So I'll have a couple slices here that aren't completely even in thickness, but that's going to make all of them a little bit more tender as I get down to this end. You can see how tender that is, it's just falling right there. We got our bison burger for Denver here also. I went ahead and threw on some cheese for the last minute or two while it was cooking so it'd get nice and melted on. You can see, got good coloration throughout. I'm aiming for kind of a medium in the middle on my burgers. I like a little bit more well done there since it is ground beef and not whole pieces like on a steak. And then once you got this set up, get whatever kind of bun you like. I've got sourdough buns. I really like the flavor they have. Throw whatever toppings you want, onions, pickles, if you want to ketchup, mustard, anything like that. Do what you want to do. Make the burger your own. And this week 3 edition of Sunday Night Foodball. Had a lot of fun with the tri-tips for San Francisco and with the bison burgers for Denver. Thanks as always to my wife for doing all the recording and editing for this. And if you enjoy this, please feel free to share, subscribe, like, anything you can do. That's what we're here for. So, look forward to seeing you next week.